Everything is fine here on DetBlock 8823, a Star Wars podcast. I'm Mike, and I'm here to talk all things Ahsoka. We are here. We have made it to the show that so many of us have been waiting so long for. And if I have to say so myself, it didn't disappoint to get it up and running. So, and I'm wearing my Ahsoka shirt. I know. So today is Wednesday. The episodes did drop on Tuesday. I did group watch it. Dustin and I watched it together shortly after they first aired. And we definitely enjoyed the ride that we went on with those first two episodes. So very excited to come and jump on, talk about the show. I'm not going to do like an episode breakdown yet. I will potentially get to that. I just want to speak my thoughts on the show in general, bring up some questions about where we're going in the story and some things I notice. Just while things are fresh in my mind, I want to kind of talk about them, and I love it. I love being able to have this platform to have those conversations, even though the conversations are more, it's not really a conversation, it's me talking. But to that point, I've got the live chat up and running again. So if you are watching right now and you want to interact, or you have questions, or you have thoughts, comments, or disagreements, or anything, bring it to the chat and let's talk some Ahsoka. So I will put the spoiler tag out there right now. Spoilers. There will be spoilers about part 1 and part 2. We're calling these parts. Part 1, part 2 of the Ahsoka show. We'll kind of dive into it. So you've been warned if you haven't watched it yet. I know it's still early. It's been just a little over 24 hours since they've first released, at least in the States. And so I don't want to spoil anything for anyone out there. So if you haven't watched it yet, press pause, go watch the episodes, and then come back and pick us back up, listen to my thoughts or our thoughts. Well, not our thoughts, it's just me, but I thought we were going to have both Dustin and Greg today. I thought we were, but so close, weren't able to make that happen. I mean, it is really late right now, and I know Dustin had a fantasy football. Greg was playing solo parent for the evening, so he had to watch both of the kids. And then Zach wasn't able to make it as well, and he hasn't been able to watch the episodes yet. So obviously he doesn't want to talk about it if he hasn't seen it yet. Totally understandable. Zach, watch them, go do that, and then let's talk some Star Wars. So again, spoiler tag, put it out there. I'll put it on the title. But I'm just glad that we're back with actual content that we can talk about now. I've been waiting so long for this. And again, watched them yesterday. Totally thrilled about what we got. And they weren't wrong. It feels like season 5 of Rebels. So it's like Rebels being brought to live action. And I'm so happy with what we got. I do have I won't say negatives on it, like nothing negative really, just some thoughts or feelings about certain aspects. And I see that I'm not alone on some of those. So we'll speak to that. Just because I mentioned those things does not mean that I didn't enjoy the episodes. I can't reiterate enough how much I did enjoy those episodes, being back in Filoni's world of Star Wars, with characters we're familiar with from the Rebels show. So just, I'm so glad we're on this path again, and looking forward to where the show will lead into. So, like I said, 2 episodes dropped, which I'm really loving, having a start where we have more than 1 episode. So then when it ends, it's like, I'm not done yet. I got, in this case, 38 more minutes of content to watch after the credits rolled for the first time after the episode 1. So I keep coming out with these 2 episodes to start off. I really appreciate that. And I love the Tuesday evening. It's not specifically the day. It's not because it was Tuesday, but I'm loving the evening drop for the episodes. So I'm in Central Standard Time. It dropped 8 o'clock Central Time yesterday evening or Tuesday evening. And it allows for, at least, me or people statewide, having it in the evening prevents spoilers for when you wake up. Because, like, I don't know if you can relate, but habit for me is I wake up, one of the first things I do is look at my phone. As I'm kind of waking up in the morning, I'll check Facebook, I'll check Instagram or Twitter, not necessarily specifically for any content, but just seeing what's out there. And many times that's where I get spoiled on certain things, or I just try to avoid it, period. Like, I try to avoid social media. When we were getting drops on Wednesday early mornings, then it's like, okay, I have to navigate through the day avoiding social media as much as possible. And I hate to admit it, but social media is addicting. So it's like, it's impossible for me to avoid all of that. Having Tuesday evening drops makes it a lot easier. I mean, it was, I want to say 30 minutes after they dropped, Dustin and I were group watching together. So loved it. So I was enjoying being able to experience it at the same time that other people were experiencing it for the first time. Being able to, again, avoiding spoilers allows me to develop my own thoughts. And then when I see people have similar thoughts or other opinions that I wasn't thinking of, then I don't know, it just makes me feel a little more authentic about my thoughts. So yeah, keep up with these evening drops. So I will say, I did mention that the second episode was 38 minutes long. I'm not really a fan of that. When it comes to live action, I prefer longer episodes. I think that 50-minute to an hour is that sweet spot for live action. If it's an animated show like Rebels or Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi, then you can be anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. I'm okay with that. I don't know why. If it's animated, I have a little bit of more of a tolerance to shorter episodes, but with live action, I want those longer ones. Now, because they aired 2 episodes at a time, then that kind of allows for a second shorter episode. Then I can let that pass, because let's see, the first episode was 56 minutes long, but 51 minutes of content. And then episode 2 or part 2 was 44 minutes or 38 minutes of content. So we had just shy of 90 minutes of content. So almost an hour and a half. It was 89 minutes. What did I say? 90? Totally forgetting what I'm saying. But yeah, just short of 90 minutes. It was 89 minutes. And I'm totally okay with that. It was perfect. So again, live action. Let's keep it to the longer episodes. Please, please. We wait so long for it. When I say so long, I mean a week. But we want the investment. So the first episode was called Master and Apprentice, which I thought that was interesting because there's a book, Master and Apprentice, and that is Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I don't know, any kind of tie-in, or not tie-in, but nod to that. Who knows? But interesting. And then part 2 was titled Toil and Trouble. So kind of diving deeper into the conflict when we get into that part 2. Like I mentioned, I'm not really going to do a breakdown. Might get into that at another day when it's not just me. So I do enjoy those breakdowns, kind of going scene by scene, and it spurs a lot more conversation, and it allows me to ask the other guys that we're with, like their thoughts on certain things, and just allows for a little bit of a flow. But I will speak to things that I'm loving, maybe not so much enjoying, and then some really good things to ponder, or some questions that I had, good questions that I had as I was watching these episodes. So let's start with the things that I'm loving. Like, and my list for loving is so much longer than uh, some call outs in that I am weary about. But anyways, first thing, the visuals, like absolutely amazing. Everything looks clean. Everything looks sharp. And I'm specifically referring to like the graphics, digital effects, motion. Most of the characters look really good. Some characters a little makeup-y, and that's okay. I don't have a problem with that. I understand it's a show, it's entertainment, and like, for instance, I'm specifically thinking of Hera that comes top of mind. Like the Twi'lek body paint was very noticeable, in my opinion. Not a bad thing. We also have really high quality TVs these days, so any you can notice anything, especially on close-ups. So again, I don't have an issue with it. I notice it, but I don't have an issue with it. It doesn't take me away from the story or what's happening. And characters are doing, or the actors and actresses are doing a phenomenal job so far. Lethal also looks absolutely amazing. It looks so much like what, or how I would perceive a live action of Lethal. And I know we've made some progress forward in terms of the development of Lethal compared to not only when we started Rebels, but where we ended Rebels, because there was some development there within the animated show. But I mean, the scene of Sabine taking her speeder down that long straight highway towards the tower, Ezra's old home, it looks perfect. I mean, and maybe it's also a nod to the Rebels animation. I mean, obviously that's cartoony looking, but they were able to match it really nicely. Like, you're on Lethal, like, you know where you're at. And if you know where you're at right away, then the visual effects are doing a fantastic job. The ships, the space scenes, the lightsabers, like everything looks so good. This is what I want to see. I will say it is a little noticeable in term, how do I want to say this? Sometimes it looks a little studio-y, but that's also a product of the setting. So like when the episode part one first started, and you're in that cockpit of the cruiser, you're on the what's the term for that? The main deck or whatever. Anyways, doesn't matter. It's late, so my mind isn't thinking as well right now. But it reminded me something out of like Star Trek or a Galaxy Quest. It's that stereotypical scene where you're just with, like, you have got the captain and the main piloting crew, and it did feel a little studio-y. And there was another scene where it was at night and Sabine's in the tower and she's kind of walking out, and the background, the sky kind of looked a little green screeny, or like you could tell it was digital effects. But I don't want to spend too much time on that, because these are just minor things. I just want to continue to reiterate how great this show looks visually. Right up there with, the top content we've seen out of Star Wars. So I don't know the exact budget that they use, but it sure looks like they put a good amount of money into the graphics and visual effects and everything. Also, the story, a solid start to the story, I would have to say, in my opinion. And this is where Filoni, gets the chef kiss, because like this is what he's known for. He's a story writer. This is where he follows well in George Lucas's footsteps, his ability to tell the story. I've got my notes over here. So these first two episodes, they really got us introduced or reintroduced for people who've watched Rebels into the story, the cast, what's going on, the direction we're going into. And we know the direction we're going. At the end of watching these two episodes, like we know what's going on. And, as Jack Sparrow said from Pirates of the Caribbean, we have our heading. And if we know what path we're on, I think that's a nod to the storytelling. So, I mean, obviously for the Ghost Crew, it's finding Ezra. For the Imperials, it's finding Thrawn. For the baddies, it's power. I mean, they even I don't know what to call those characters. They're not Sith. Dark Force wielders, meaning Balin and Shin. They're seeking power. The means to the end of seeking that power is finding Thrawn, and Balin kind of alludes to that as well. But we know what everyone wants already. We know there's been conflict, meaning not outside of the obvious conflict between the New Republic and the Empire. We can see that there's conflict between Ahsoka and Sabine. Like something happened there. Something happened. There's tension. It's not just visually that you can see that tension. It's also in how they're talking to one another. It's the dialogue and everything. So just the way this is being structured, this show that's laid out, is being done in a very well manner. Music is beautiful, and that's important to me. If you can have a good score, it takes a movie, it takes a show to the next level. And I was really digging the music, and we even get some more Star Wars rock. Now, some of the Star Wars rock we got in the past wasn't necessarily my favorite. One I did like, though, was Jedi Fallen Order, the music that Cal Kestis is listening to, like in the intro and leading up to the start of the game. Like, that's good Star Wars rock. The Star Wars rock playing when Sabine was on her speeder, that was good Star Wars rock. But then a lot of the other scores, they feel like Star Wars. It feels John Williams-esque in many ways. And there's a lot of tie-ins to like the Rebels music, as like you've got Ahsoka's song. You've got I don't think it's like Sabine's theme, but it's the music that really reminds me of Sabine. If you go back to, I think it's season 3 of Rebels, when Sabine is training with Ezra and Kanan, and she's dueling Kanan at this point, and she's kind of opening up to what happened between her and her family, and you just hear that music in the background. That's been incorporated in the show a lot as well. And so again, just the music is amazing. And I feel like we're picking up kind of like what I said before, where we left off on Rebels. I love that. I love that it's essentially season 5 of Rebels. And that makes me feel like we're being rewarded for watching the Rebels show. I mean, obviously we're already going to be rewarded because it was a fantastic show, great entertainment. But for those of us who invested the time in watching it, we're getting a little extra when it comes to this show. So I enjoy that. Now, one of the questions I have based on that, so I'll give this to all you listeners and viewers out there, and you can either respond the live chat right now, which I don't know, it's late, so I don't know how many people are out there right now, but you can also hit us on our social media handles and reference this question. But at the end of part 2, are those scenes between, or are those scenes with Ahsoka and Sabine supposed to be the exact same scenes that we saw at the final episode of Rebels? They are almost scene for scene, even to the point of there's that moment where Sabine is up at the mural and she touches the face of Ezra on the mural, like in the same manner. So it makes me feel like that's supposed to be an overlapping scene, just bringing the animated scenes literally to live action, which would put the events leading up to that within the Ahsoka show predating the end of Rebels. And at the end of Rebels, if you've seen it, in that last episode, there's a large gap of time that you jump from at the end of the conflict resolution to the end of the episode. There's a fair amount of time, and they make that obvious. So maybe some of these events in the Ahsoka show for part 1 and most of part 2 are leading up to that final moment in Rebels, and then the end of part 2 is that overlapping moment with Rebels, and then anything part 3 and on is new, or after what we know of Rebels. That would be my guess, but the only thing that makes me question that is it's not the same depiction of Ahsoka that we got. It is, but it isn't. Like, in both, she's standing outside her ship. She's standing in kind of a stoic stance. But in Rebels, she has like a more of a cloak, a hooded cloak with a large staff, almost Gandalf looking. And in this show, it's just more of her standard garb, no hood, no staff. Subtle differences. So I don't know, like, if it is the same time, it wouldn't bother me that the depictions are different, but I just more want to know for like, is this a different time or is this the same time? Just for understanding where we are in the story. So what do you think? Do you think those are overlapping times, or do you think these are two different points and it was just almost coincidental that how those events transpire? So she's walking down the steps leading up to the mural in the same camera angle, same everything, walks up to the mural, same point of view as us, the viewers, and touching the face of Ezra, and then turning around and there being Ahsoka. So I'm someone that doesn't believe they're coincidences. So I think if I had to guess, I would say it's the same point of time. So I kind of alluded this already in visuals. Lightsaber duels, they're being done beautifully. From the sounds, the imagery, the actual combat, everything looks great. And like some of this combat stuff, whether it's lightsaber duels, space battles, those things to me are what are major importances to Star Wars movies. Like, it's Star Wars, so fighting, combat, that's important to me. And so far, that's all being done super well. I have let's see, what does this say? Oh, and attention to detail was really cool here. Something that I noticed when I was watching. So there's a moment where Shin arrives where Sabine is at the tower. It's nighttime. It's towards the end of part 1, and or not Ahsoka, Sabine is getting ready to fight her. And if you noticed, Sabine gets into the ready position. And going back to that scene where she's training with Ezra continues when he's first starting to teach her. It's like, all right, start in your ready stance, get in your ready stance, and he keeps mentioning that. And that's the stance that she gets into right here. And I thought that was just kind of a cool nod. And obviously Ezra, especially from these episodes, means so much to her, and vice versa. And she's continuing on that training that she got from Ezra, no matter how brief it was. But just something I remember I texted Dustin right away as we were watching. I'm like, oh my God, there's the stance. That's the stance that the Reddies. And I will say, I kind of only was able to notice that because I binged Rebels in the days leading up to the airing of Ahsoka. So it was still fresh in my mind. And since that's towards the end of the Rebel show and towards the end of season 3, I think it's the end of season 3. It's either end of season 3 or starting at the beginning of season 4, but it was fresh in my mind. Also, the casting of Sabine is spot on. Like, they did a great job of casting her character. So out of all the characters so far that we are familiar with, Ahsoka, Hera, even Azid, it's the same guy, the same voice. I think that's the same guy. But outside of like droids and stuff like that's easy to mimic. It did a great job of casting her. It really feels like Sabine, personality wise, delivery in how she talks, all of it. Just great job of casting Sabine. So well done there. And like I said, writer Azadi, not Azid, Azadi. Cool that they brought him back in too. So if you remember, he was the one of the guy. He was in the outskirts of Lothal who knew of Ezra's parents and fought with them and everything. He almost shot down Ezra when they first met, if I recall. But in the Ahsoka show, he's the governor of Lothal, and he's the one that's at that celebration and is going to be introducing Sabine to the crowd, but Sabine's not there. That's the same guy, and I believe it's the same voice actor because it sounded spot on. So just something I thought that was really cool. So that listing of stuff, I mean, there are many other things that I'm really happy with this show. These are kind of things that just stood out. And I think more in terms of like production, on what I was really enjoying. Now, on the flip side, there was one thing that I don't want to say bothered me. How should I phrase this? Was kind of pulling me out a little bit. If I have to think too much about it, then it's kind of drawing me out of the story a little bit, but maybe it's intentional, maybe not. I don't know. But the dialogue pacing. And this was another thing that as Dustin and I were watching, I texted him right away. And I find it fascinating that, I go to bed afterwards and then wake up. This is one of the topics of conversation amongst fans. And again, just because I feel this way doesn't mean I don't like the show. Like, this is just my opinion. I was completely entertained by both episodes so far. But the dialogue just seems a little slow, overly dramatic, just a lot of pauses in it. And I know, at least from the conversations I've seen, a lot of it is directed towards Ahsoka, but I don't think it's just with Ahsoka. I think it's with some of the with many of the cast, that it's just any dialogue interactions that are taking place seem to have dramatic pauses between the exchanges. So if you were kind of seeing what I was doing there, I was kind of replicating it a little bit. And it's almost like there are, this is being a little dramatic, but it's like there's 3 seconds between each exchange. And not only that, you'll get someone saying something and then they'll pause and then there'll be like this movement or this facial expression or this visual response. It's like, I don't know, it's like movement cues that are being used. I don't know, but it's just something that was noticeable to me. Let's see if and once I noticed that, it was tough to unnotice it. And I caught myself like counting in between the counting the time in between the dialogue exchanges, and I don't know, it didn't help me in that. It just only made it worse for me. But I think most of it occurs between Ahsoka and Sabine. Or really Ahsoka and Sabine, or Ahsoka and Hera. And I think that's why it's mostly being directed at Ahsoka, because it seems to be any interaction she has, but it's not just her in those interactions. It's both the characters. So it'd be like, this is how I feel. And then the other person, well, I don't think I don't think that goes that way. Well, then let's go find it. Obviously what I was saying has no, I don't know, but it was just something that was noticeable to me. Let's see, what else do I got? And maybe that was deliberate, because again, there was tension. There's obvious tension in Ahsoka, and mostly I shouldn't say directed, but the tension is mostly between Sabine and Ahsoka, and I think that's intentional for sure. There was something that happened, because Sabine was training under Ahsoka, and then all of a sudden she's not, and Ahsoka even said, she kind of abandoned Sabine, similar to, or she walked away from Sabine, kind of like how she walked away from Anakin. So obviously tension is playing a part of that. So let's see. Oh, I was just making the comment that when you have it that way, whether it's intentional or not, it makes it seem a little unrealistic. And not that realism is, something Star Wars always follows. Because, I mean, lightsabers, sound in space, just kind of a disregard to physics as we know in our real world. Like, Star Wars doesn't follow that stuff. Like, it's sci-fi, it's space fantasy. So, like, realism shouldn't really matter. But I think there's a difference when it comes to realism in terms of production, or like content or acting, versus realism that's like in universe to Star Wars. Realism as it relates to the universe within Star Wars, do what you want. Like, who cares about gravity? Who cares about the rules of gravity? Who cares about the rules of physics? That's not as important to me. But like, I want conversation to be realistic, I don't want awkward pauses in between every conversation. So, and then the only other thing, we just had to have another lightsaber stabbing where the wounded doesn't die. And granted, so Sabine got stabbed by Shin. The stab was more off to the side, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a kill blow, but lightsaber wounds where people survive was already a topic of conversation or scrutiny before this show, so this doesn't really help at all. And if it's a Jedi that is wounding like a bad guy, like a Sith or an enemy or something like that, if they stabbed or wounded someone, I could see the recipient of that wound surviving more so, because the Jedi, they don't like taking life. They are trying to preserve lives. So I could see them strategically wounding them in a way that would stop them from fighting, but wouldn't kill them. Granted, I say that, but Kenobi was, freaking sliced Maul in half and he survived. So that's kind of an exception to that. But, you have Vader stab Reva twice. Why wouldn't he just wipe her out? Granted, there could be another motive behind it. Who knows? Maybe his intention was for her to survive. But now now we've got another baddie that's stabbing someone and the person lives. So, but I think we all knew that they kind of left that cliffhanger at the end of the episode, but I don't know how many people, if you saw the trailers, you would even know that Sabine survives, because you have scenes with her with shorter hair, unless you argue, well, maybe it was a flashback where you saw that. But I was not convinced that she was dead. I knew she was going to be still alive. So maybe that makes it a little better. But okay, so now going back to some fun stuff, I have some things to ponder, or some questions, or things for everyone to think about a little bit. So one of the first things that comes to my mind is the Inquisitor Maruk. Is that Maruk? Marak? One or the other. Who is that? I think we're supposed to be feeling that that's someone of importance. I think it's probably gonna be a bait and switch type of a thing. But I want to know who that is. This is a new Inquisitor. I believe it's a new Inquisitor that we haven't seen before. I know there's some resemblance to one of the Inquisitors that encounters Kanan, Ahsoka, and Ezra and Maul at the Sith Temple at the end of season 2. It's a very similar mask, but one, we were led to believe that he died. Again, that doesn't mean that he didn't die, because he was the one that he was fleeing, but his saber got cut, so it started malfunctioning, and then it went out, and the helicopter thing stopped, and then he just kind of fell screaming. So led to believe that he died, but doesn't mean that. But the only other thing is that if I recall, he had like 4 fingers. He was an alien and had like 3 or 4 fingers, which would be a noticeable difference. And this character was humanoid, so had 5 fingers. Who knows? Maybe they weren't paying that much attention to it, or characters seem to change in appearance, and that's totally fine. So who knows? Maybe it is that same one. But I think people, or Disney or Lucasfilm or whoever, wants to think that might be Ezra. I know there's a lot of people that are speculating it is Ezra, but is it Ezra? Is it Barriss Offee? Who knows? I like to think it could be Barriss Offee. I think Barriss Offee will play a role somewhere in this, because we don't have closure on her character, and there is a history with Ahsoka there. So it'd be a good way to bring her in. But I don't know, because listening to them duel, it didn't seem like a female character. It seemed more like a male character. So that got me thinking something else. could it be Jason Syndulla? So that is the son of Hera and Kanan. We're introduced to him at the final episode of season 4 of Rebels. And when we see him, he's probably like 8 years old. He's not, I mean, he's a kid. He's not an infant or a toddler. He's still quite young, but maybe there's enough time that's passed where he's now a teenager, late teens, maybe early 20s. And that's kind of the size and the build of that Inquisitor. And what makes me wonder that is, we're introduced to Jason. His father's no longer around. Kanan's dead, which also Kanan was a Jedi, so he's Force sensitive, which Inquisitors Force sensitive. But in those scenes with Hera, do you ever see or hear of Jason? And you would think if Jason's still a child, he would be somewhere near Hera at some point. She's the mother to him. I mean, I guess she could be, or Jason could be with Hera's father. But I don't know. It's just interesting that nothing about Jason has been brought up so far, when that was one of the final things we were given from Rebels. And if it is Jason, then it would strongly resemble like the whole Kylo, or not Kylo, Ben Solo. And if we remember, Ben Solo falling to the dark side and becoming Kylo Ren was kind of what created that tension and that separation for the original trilogy crew. So Leia, Han, and Luke. Luke goes off onto an island because he feels he failed Ben. Han goes back to the smuggler life that he was, and Leia goes back to being a military general or a military leader. Here again, like I said before, there's obvious tension that's taking place amongst the Ghost crew. They've all kind of gone their separate ways. And part of that was dealing with the training of Sabine with Ahsoka. So maybe in Ahsoka's training as well, maybe she was training Jason, knowing that he's Force sensitive and could be a not recruited, could become, I know Ahsoka's not a Jedi, but a force of good, pun intended. So who knows? I just saw there's kind of a parallel there if it would be Jason Syndulla. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. The more and more I think of it, the more I would want it to be Jason Syndulla. Jason Solo is from Legends, so I keep wanting to say that. But no expectations, no, this is how it needs to be by any means. But I think that would be absolutely fascinating. I'm sure people would find ways to complain about it, like, oh, we're already seeing that with with Kylo Ren. Well, yes, but it's different as well here. So we'll just have to find out. Also, who are these villains? Specifically, Baylan and Shin. To me, they're absolutely fascinating, intriguing. What are their motives? Obviously, we know one of them was a Jedi. What's their story? What's their end game here? I think they alluded to end game as kind of power, but that's not really the end game. That's the means. But they are using this situation to find Thrawn to gain favor or power. But for what? Who are they trying to impress, or who are they trying to have power over? And to me, they also kind of walk that line between good and evil. Again, we're to look at them as like villains. They're obviously so far the bad, some of the bad guys in this. They're Shin has been fighting. Did she fight Ahsoka? I know she fought Sabine. I'm trying to remember if she fought Ahsoka too. No, the Inquisitor fought Ahsoka. But I think they walk that line of good and bad. It's possible that we could see one of them do good in the long run. If Balin, to me, it's more Balin kind of walks that, because he also has a respect for the Jedi one way or another, obviously, because he was one. But there is that exchange between Morgan and Balin where Balin was like, it's a shame that we need to go take out Ahsoka because she's like a last of her kind, meaning the Jedi. And Morgan's like something along the lines of showing sympathy for them, and then his response was just facts. But that's it sounded very Thrawnish to me. And Thrawn in my eyes is another, especially from reading the books, Thrawn more in the Rebels is a villain, but when you read the books, it's like he is, but he's also not. So that's kind of what Balin is in my eyes. And Balin just seems a little less unhinged, less evil. Shin, I don't know if Shin blinks. Has she blinked in any of her scenes yet? But she seems like she has some trauma behind those eyes, some struggles. And she's the apprentice. Balin is the master. I also wonder if I'll get back to that because I kind of comment on that later. So be interesting to find out. And something I thought that was really cool when we were first introduced to them. So that's how the first episode starts. You see this Star Cruiser or this New Republic cruiser. And there's this ship that's coming. I think they thought it was Ahsoka ship, and they're like, "Oh, this is too early. How is she already back? Or how are they already back?" Meaning Ahsoka and Huyang. And they find out it's not them, and that they're claiming to be Jedi, or I think they claim to be Jedi. And the captain of this cruiser is like, "I'm not buying it. I'm going to call their bluff here, but let them board and let's figure out who these people are." And that whole how that all played out, it really reminded me of how episode 1 starts, when you have Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi boarding the Trade Federation ship, and things go awry, and there's a fight that breaks out, and sabers are brought out. And I will say in general, I saw a lot of episode 1 or prequel trilogy in this show so far. And I thought that was pretty cool. And again, just how that started. It obviously it's the opposite though, because these are dark side wielders. And it was kind of cool to see that like juxtaposition there. And they kind of look like Jedi. But obviously their cloaks are a little more grayish black, not the brown that Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan had, but a lot of parallels there. And I thought it was also cool there because they also did a little nod to Ahsoka's "I am no Jedi," because when the captain calls the bluff, he's like, "I know you're not Jedi, you're Imperial scum, you should have gone the way of the rest of the Imperials when we defeated you back then." And then Balin's like, at the end of their exchange, he's like, "Well, you were right about one thing." And then ignites his lightsaber and like stabs the captain, and is like, "We are no Jedi." So I thought that was pretty cool, because in the back of the shirt it says "I am no Jedi," and that's one of my favorite lines from Ahsoka. So I thought that was a pretty cool nod. But so yeah, we know Balin is a Jedi, a former Jedi, and we figured that out, or Hu Yang figured that out doing analysis on the lightsabers. And both lightsabers were constructed in a way that Jedi were taught through their, Jedi lightsaber construction training. So they were both produced the same way, but only Balin's was recognized by Hu Yang, or was in the database of lightsaber hilts. And that's how Hu Yang was able to figure out, okay, that one's Balin. So, okay, this must be Balin. But we don't know who Shin is. And I mean, Balin probably taught Shin how to construct the lightsaber, which he would have taught her the same way he learned, which is why it would look like a Jedi construction. So, but who is Shin? Is she a Night Sister? I don't think so. Maybe Pantoran? Her skin really isn't blue, but like, she kind of gives off that vibe of either like a Night Sister or Pantoran, but probably neither one of them. But we'll see. That is probably one of the focuses of the show, not one of the main ones, but one of them will be, who are these characters? Let's see. Oh yeah. Another key question. Is Sabine force sensitive? So, or not only that, is she a Jedi Padawan? And it keeps getting reference that Ahsoka was once, and presumably now again at the end of part 2, that Ahsoka is a master to Sabine, that there's been training. And I think I've been referencing that quite a bit, even in this podcast. Not to mention the title of the episode is Master and Apprentice. Okay, well, that could either be Balin and Shin, but it could also be Ahsoka and Sabine. But they don't necessarily designate that Ahsoka was a Jedi master to Sabine, or Sabine being a Jedi Padawan. I think they dropped the term Padawan once, but they didn't say Jedi Padawan. So they are they purposefully alluding to like a comparison of a Jedi training, but there are other masters and apprentices, or masters and Padawans, that are not Jedi. I mean, you can take apprenticeships for any skill set that you're learning. So I think they're purposefully making you wonder, like, okay, what's going on here? There's also some comments that are made throughout the episodes that pertain to this. So Hu Yang, in response to Ahsoka telling him after the encounter that they had on the temple, Ahsoka's like, next time have my back. And Hu Yang's like, that's the job for a Padawan. So that's where they name dropped Padawan. So they're like, okay, alluding to the fact Jedi Padawan, Jedi Master. Is that kind of like foreshadowing or alluding to the past? Who knows? We'll find out. Also to Sabine. So Hu Yang is talking with Sabine, and this is while she's recovering. They're like looking out the window, and Hu Yang almost like insults her, not purposefully. He's a droid, so I don't think he necessarily recognizes that. He just states facts. But he was like, your force skills are like far less than the others, either referring to Ahsoka and the two Dark Force wielders they encountered, or maybe Hu Yang's comparing it to other Jedi trainees that he's known of, or Jedi master or Padawans Um, but he likes like you don't measure up in force capabilities with the rest. Now he meant it more as an encouragement, I think. But Sabine's like, excuse me? Like, why are you insulting me? um so but that was very loose words there too, because putting it that way is not saying that she is force sensitive, and it's also not saying that she isn't force sensitive. It's very vague there. Again, I think it's meant to leave you thinking, is she force sensitive or not? But there's been other things that we've seen about Sabine that opens the door to, is she force sensitive? I mean, she wields the dark saber, and there's been a lot of conversation about connecting to the dark saber helps you wield it. Going back to Rebels, she talked about how heavy it was when she first used it, and then as she used it more, it felt lighter. We've seen Din Djarin try and use the dark saber and fail miserably with it. But Sabine ends up being able to wield the dark saber just fine. And now she's wielding Ezra's saber as well. She also hears voices of Ezra. Now, in that scene, she could have been sleeping and dreaming about it, but again, we can also interpret it as being kind of like a force vision, almost a force voice, not specifically Ezra talking to. Well, maybe it was. I can't say it isn't, but there's all these details that are like making you wonder: is she force sensitive? Is she training to be a Jedi? We don't know. I mean, but also, like I said, Ahsoka's not a Jedi, so would she even be training him to be a Jedi? Or maybe encountering Luke and all of that from the Mandalorian and building the school, maybe she's helping build this for Luke as well. So we'll see. But also, like, does it even matter being do you have to be force sensitive to become a Jedi? Yoda talks about how the force is all around us. It's in everything. It connects everyone. It binds everyone. So, but I know that there's also the whole concept of midichlorians. So if you follow midichlorians, then you have to have those to be able to wield the force, but maybe you don't. If the force isn't everything, then that means even your average being, your human, will have some kind of force sensitivities. So maybe it's just a spectrum. Every human or every living being has a spectrum of force sensitivities, but that might just be diving too deep or reading too deep into everything. But I think, again, not to beat a dead horse here, but I think they're trying to make you wonder, is she force sensitive, or will she become, or is she training to be a Jedi? To me, Morgan Elsbeth's character got a whole lot more fascinating in this show, now knowing that she is a descendant of the witches of Dathomir. Like, never even thought about that from the Mandalorian, and now I can completely see it. It's funny, once you get a news bit information like that, or once you're informed of something, then it's like, oh, okay, that makes a whole lot more sense now. And like I said, because of that, it got a whole more so much more fascinating. And which means, are we going to get Asajj again? I don't, not that those two things relate, but it just took my mind there all of a sudden. We know Asajj is connected with Ahsoka, and they've worked together, and they teamed up after she was fleeing the Jedi coming after her for blaming her of the temple, blowing up the temple, the Jedi temple. So, and I think even in the way they left off opened it up for them coming back together again. And I don't recall Asajj dying in anything. She might have been Dark Disciples, but not quite sure where that lines up in the timeline. So maybe we will see Asajj, but I'm curious to see where her character goes. Are we going to go to Dathomir? Are we going to see some of her dark magic? Again, she's a descendant, so we don't know how in tune her force capabilities are. But I think we already kind of saw some when she was open or playing with the map. So there's something there. And I'm definitely curious to see where it goes. I also thought it was really cool that the ancient temple built by the Night Sisters of Dathomir. So that's the one that Ahsoka was in to get the map, the key. Very much reminded me of Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. It's like one of those temples that you're in, trying to solve the puzzles, trying to obtain relics or certain items. And it just gave off that feel. And it especially gave me the feel of the Zepho. Even the depictions on the wall, the technology within the puzzle. So you've got those little as she was aligning those pillars, which was like straight out of Fifth Element, multipass. As she's arranging those, and when she gets someone aligned correctly, then that the ball on the wall starts glowing. Like that technology was very Zepho-esque. So I wonder if we're going to get more connections with the Zepho, similar to the Jedi games that we've gotten. So many possibilities, so much potential, so many things we could explore. Not to put that expectation that we will explore these things, but it's awesome when you can have those opportunities. So we'll just have to see where everything goes. And where are we on time right now? I think we're over an hour now. And so I'll start wrapping this up. Again, I'll probably do more of a full dive into the episodes later. Obviously not going to do that tonight. No. But some other just random things I'll quickly speak through that I jotted down. Another Lothcat, a different version of it too. It looks really good. I think it's probably the most realistic live action Lothcat that we've gotten. I think of the one that we saw in season 1 of Mandalorian. That one looked a little off, just its head and mouth in comparison to its body. Like I feel like its mouth was like all the way across. This Lothcat that Sabine has looks more like what a real Lothcat might appear like. Really love the whole concept in that exchange with, I think it was Hera and Ahsoka. If Thrawn is alive, so could Ezra. That's kind of what's setting everything in motion here. Sabine's jacket has Republic Navy patch on it. I don't know why I thought that was cool, but I did. Just kind of a nod to her help with the New Republic, even though she has the Mandalorian descendancy. So like they made the intention to show Sabine's armor, because we saw it when she's in Ezra's tower. You see kind of under the desk, you see her helmet. She's looked at the armor and taken it out at one point. But what she's wearing is something New Republic. So it's kind of like this point of she stepped away from her Mandalorian self to help the New Republic. And now she's kind of at the end of this episode 2, she's getting back into that armor and being the Sabine that we know. So I thought that was cool. And just the fact that Sabine is living in Ezra's tower. I think there was a real cool showing of how much Sabine and Ezra mean to one another. Even in that recording that Ezra had for Sabine, he's like, you're like a sister to me. Like, we're family. I know we're not blood family, but I view you like a sister. And there's all these other things that just really allude to that. And she's living in his house. She's holding on to this last recording and she's listening to it on her own time. Ezra tells her, like, I'm counting on you to finish the fight, see this all through, like almost putting the burden on her to continue this. When Ahsoka's wondering if Sabine will even help, like, is she even interested in helping? Hera's like, oh, she wants to help she'll want to help specifically for Ezra. And Sabine doesn't even really seem interested in helping Ahsoka within their interactions until Ahsoka mentions to her that she knows how to find Ezra. And then she has that like to her. It's like, okay, now you have my attention. So Ezra means a lot to her. And Ezra's going to be the driving force of this kind of investigation or rescue. And to them, it's worth the potential of bringing it. I mean, they don't want to bring Thrawn back, but they recognize that, they're probably both in the same place or in the same general vicinity. Bringing back one jeopardizes bringing back the other, because if one's alive, then the other's probably alive. But it's worth it to them. So all fascinating stuff. And I could go on and on and on. I have a whole bunch of notes that I take. Then I put the notes onto my show sheet. So that's kind of what I was looking at. And I really needed it this evening because I am freaking exhausted, and having these notes really helps me continue that conversation and remind myself of my train of thoughts. So, but we will speak to more of it another day. More specifically when we have more of the crew on and kind of have that discussion and interaction of what we thought of this show. So again, really happy with what we got. Not disappointed at all. If you are disappointed, that's okay too. You don't have to like everything. You don't. Be respectful of other people's opinions. We don't want any of that toxicity. You'll see it in any conversation, like any discussion of Star Wars related content. It's almost fascinating to me, but it's okay to have things you like and have things you don't like. I think what's important is just remember it's entertainment and everyone's entitled to their opinions. And that's okay. But more to come. Loving it. Can't wait to see more. I think we still have 6 more episodes left. And they'll continue to come out on Tuesdays, I believe, Tuesday evenings for us stateside. And let's see what kind of ride we go on. I'm going to enjoy it the whole way. I was going to say I don't like to compare, but also I do like to compare. It's a good way for myself to gauge like quality of content. I still think in terms of production, I don't think Ahsoka captivated me as much as like Andor did, or like season 1 of Mando. But I think it's more of a long game with this, because I think Filoni it had a little more challenging a situation here, because it's also a continuation, and continuation from animation to live action. There are going to be a lot of people, Star Wars fans, that haven't watched the animated shows, and you're going to have to kind of bring them into that story one way or another. And I know Dave Filoni mentioned that you don't have to watch previous stuff to understand what's going on in the Ahsoka show, which might be true, but at the same time, it doesn't hurt to have that background knowledge of these characters. It's going to make it that much easier for you. Like, we don't need introductions to who these characters are. And some of this episode, more so the first episode and kind of both the episodes, had sort of introductions to the characters themselves. Like they spoke about themselves one way or another, about their past and everything. So that a past that people who've watched Rebels or Clone Wars already knew. So you're kind of reintroducing characters in a story. And if you're already familiar with that, it's not going to be as interesting. Not that it's not interesting, but maybe not as interesting as having a brand new character like Mando or Din Djarin. Like this is a whole, that when that show came out, it was a whole new character, a whole new story that we're learning about fresh. So we're all on the same page on that. We all have to get background information, and we're just taking in every bit of new information. When, like I said, if it's a character we're already familiar with, you're relearning a story, and second time through is never as interesting. Well, I shouldn't say never, but many times, like second time learning about a story just isn't as fascinating. So like when I say that out loud, it makes like I feel like I'm you know, badgering it or whatnot, but I'm not. Again, I'm enjoying what we're getting. But I think as we progress and we get into the new situation that's unfolding, that's when for me it's going to become more fascinating. So we're only 2 episodes in. It's probably going to be multiple seasons, and I know we're going to love what I know I'm going to love what we're going to get, because it's Star Wars and I love all Star Wars and I'm going to enjoy it. So ready or not, here we come. Ahsoka, I am no Jedi. I love that line. I know I said that, but love it. All right, well, I will wrap everything up, speak to our social media handles. So you can find us on Twitter at DetBlockAA23pod, on Instagram at detention_block_AA_23, and then our Facebook group and YouTube channels, Detention Block AA23, a Star Wars podcast. Bring us your subscriptions. Click that subscription button. Bring us your comments, your likes, reviews, follow us, ratings, all of that. We greatly appreciate all the little things that you do for us. It really helps us get our podcast name out there in the hundreds and thousands of Star Wars podcasts that there are. And again, reach out to us. We'll bring you in as a part of the show just as much as we are. We love the interaction with our fans and our guests and everything. So don't be afraid. Don't hesitate. Reach out. And with that, looking forward to next Tuesday. And then the following Tuesday, I'm out of town. So I'm going to have to find a way to watch. I mean, I'm going to be out west in Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. So probably won't be spending much time around a television, but that's neither here nor there. I'll figure it out. But have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your evening, whatever time of day it is for you. Have a great rest of your week. And as always, may the Force be with you. And also with the Ahsoka show. Filling in for Dustin there.